If you're a finance major, what is one of the most lucrative industries that you can break into after college? I would make the case that it's private equity. Now, working in private equity for about 15 years now, I don't know what everyone's path is, obviously, but I certainly have some experience in working with so many folks in the industry and knowing how they broke into it, that I've got a few tips, I've got a few ideas, and I'd love to share those with you here. Stay tuned and you'll hear how I broke into private equity, how others do, and what some of the differences are. Before getting into my path, I thought I might talk about what the typical path is, at least from my experience. I think very common folks will have gone to maybe not an Ivy League school for their undergrad, but certainly an upper tier school. What's very common is working on Wall Street in a bulge bracket firm, or working for one of the very well-known consultancies. Think McKinsey, Bain. After a few years working on Wall Street, go back and get an MBA, then it's a potential to start working in private equity. My path was definitely a bit more unconventional. Part of the reason is because in undergrad, I didn't really have a good feel for what private equity was. I mean, I had read about it and heard about it and had this mystique to it, but in terms of nuts and bolts, I didn't really understand it. My goal was to become a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. What I thought was a good path to do so was to work in industrial engineering, which is about making processes more efficient and standardized and whatnot. Go into consulting for manufacturing companies for a few years, get that operational experience, go back, get my MBA, and after the MBA, work in a Fortune 500 company in some sort of management rotational program and work at that company for 20 or 30 years, rise through the ranks, and then get the gold watch and then retire, or retire and then get the gold watch. I'm not sure which the sequence is, but man, I have my life all mapped out. I get into graduate school, and that's when I finally start learning about private equity, about investment banking, really about deal making within the middle market and the lower middle market. Kind of pivoted very quickly to try and start finding jobs in private equity or in investment banking. Well, as I mentioned in a previous video on perseverance, I wasn't too successful about getting the jobs that I really wanted throughout my career. However, was able to get a job that was in a boutique investment bank and got some good deal experience there. But still, I kept working, kept trying to get hired by a private equity firm, and honestly, it just never happened. I realized that if I wanted to work for a private equity firm, that private equity firm was gonna have to have my name on it. I was gonna be the only one that would hire myself. Well, I mean, my partner and I did start Four Pillars Investors. It doesn't have our names on the door, so to speak. Where both of our beliefs were right is that we had to start our own firm in order to really land a job in private equity. Now, what I will tell you is that there are a lot of differences between my path and what I would call a more conventional path. Let me step back though. Finding a job, any job, is really difficult. There's the combination of actually filling in the job application, networking, and getting to know folks in the industry. And I was absolutely doing all that. I was living in Kansas City, not a ton of private equity in Kansas City, but I was certainly networking within the people in the industry here. Same thing for St. Louis, making travels there, Chicago as well. Now, what I will tell you is that particularly in Kansas City and St. Louis, just because there's pockets of people that overlap and people are generally want to help you and whatnot. I was successful in meeting with people that worked at private equity firms, including the principals and the managing partners and whatnot. And it was a combination of perhaps my background didn't fit perfectly with what they expected, or they didn't really have a role for somebody like me, or right then, or maybe didn't even have room for me at all, or didn't, they weren't hiring. And so through this process, met a lot of great people, really laid the foundation for some good relationships. But at the end of the day, I just couldn't find a job. I mean, I was able to find employment, I guess I should say, just wasn't able to find a job directly in private equity. So what are the benefits of the conventional path into private equity? Well, what I will tell you is that, whether it's investment banking or private equity directly or some sort of financial analyst role, in my view, what the conventional path is that it will get you a lot of deal experience. You'll work on, numerous transactions. You'll really work on projects to understand why a deal makes sense, why a deal doesn't make sense. You'll have significant financial modeling experience, so you'll be able to, create a 20-tab Excel model that forecasts cash flows to the penny, and sensitivity analysis, six ways to Sunday in terms of every potential variable in your model. So, I mean, there are definite strengths to going down that path because it's concentrated experience in presumably, different industries or at least different types of deals, sizes of deals, subsectors, et cetera, et cetera. So I am not going to knock that path at all, because at the end of the day, it's kind of like being a professional athlete or an athlete. I mean, sure, you get some benefits. Like if you want to be a football player, sure, you might get some benefits from playing basketball or playing some other sports. But at the end of the day, if you really want to get good at football, you got to spend some time playing football. At least that's my opinion. Maybe, who knows? I mean, I tried out for the football team and the guy behind me was, I think, 120 pounds and I was, barely 70 pounds. So I think you can get a feel for how long my football career lasted. So maybe I should stick to the advice on private equity. Looking at my own experience though, I kind of feel like what I've gotten is the best of both worlds. I've definitely been, worked on a lot of deals in a lot of different industries. From, between my experience working in investment banking for just a couple of years and then consulting, part of those roles helped me develop an ability to quickly analyze and quickly understand an industry, a company, et cetera, et cetera. And additionally, just over the years, I've just worked on a lot of deals in a lot of different industries and whatnot. And so I feel like there's that level of competence and just experience in looking at a wide variety of deals. And also, I mean, I've a lot of my career in Excel, understand modeling, understand the drivers that influence an income statement, how an income statement influences a balance sheet and vice versa. And, really the interlinking three financial statements. So I feel like I have a good grasp of that. However, I will make at least a couple of distinctions or differences as to why I feel like an unconventional path can sometimes, in certain settings, be actually better. First off, having actually run companies, if we're working on a deal and, we close the deal and there are troubles within the portfolio company, my partner and I both have experience sitting in the seat of the CEO. So we have direct experience piloting, many different companies. I think I've been a CEO or have been like one of the key decision makers in probably 3 or 4 different companies. So we have that direct operational experience and have the ability to influence the results of a company from within. The other aspect, and I think this relates to having actually been CEO as well, but we definitely have a different take on the importance of financial modeling within a deal. Now let me step back for a minute. I think a lot of business owners, when they're going through a M&A transaction, they'll have to go through what's called a QOV, a quality of earnings, and it's not a fun process. It's very, very detailed, and the accounting firm has to follow specific standards and whatnot in order to arrive at what we're going to call a QOV adjusted EBITDA figure. That's not great, but it's definitely something that I feel is very important. You have to know what you're buying, and what it comes down to is what you're buying is largely cash flow. Sure, you're buying some assets, current assets, AR, whatnot, but at the end of the day, you're buying something that is going to generate cash flow. So you need to know exactly how much cash that company has generated on a historical basis. Now, when you look at the financial model, which is largely about projections and where you see the company going, don't get me wrong, there is a need for a financial model. But I have to be honest with you. I'm sitting here. Am I the most successful private equity guy ever? No. Am I the least successful? Well, I don't know about that. I'm not going to go that far. I do say I'm the most boring guy in private equity, but I would like to think I'm not the least successful guy. Maybe not yet, or not all the way that low. But still, who's right? And I think generally speaking, it's somewhere in the middle, but it's just one aspect of the differences between what I consider traditional private equity and the four pillars model, which is really about getting to know the person, getting to know the company, and understanding, but thinking about the company through the lens of the CEO as if we were actually going to sit in that seat and what we would want to see happen once we took over that role. So I don't know. I mean, I think that I've definitely shared some thoughts here that might be other people don't believe, or it makes me sound naive about how to be successful in private equity. But what do you think? Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.